doubts and dreams take flight. We flash in the dark, so let's flash bright. On a mission to save ourselves, break with dogma, with these shelves. My friend, if you choose to be free, I'll light your path if you'll walk with me. We're going home to where we'll find a world where life is worth the climb. One day we will crash and we will die. Oh, my friends, that's not tonight. No more shadows in our mind. Leave the fears and past behind. On this pale blue dot, we will make our stand. Light within, we will be your hands. We're going home to where we'll find a world where life is worth the climb. One day we will crash and we will die. Oh, my friends, that's not tonight. By math and science, our path is clear. Strangers once, our re-entry nears. Sighting land, we'll quit this sea. I'm going home, who will come with me?
Still one of my favorites. It is 9 a.m. on second Saturday. It is another weekly meeting of these godless whores. You know, we love being who we are, and we're done pretending that we're something else. Yeah, this is how it goes. Today we will caffeinate, we will hydrate, we will probably bloviate. It's fine, and we'll just we'll call it Washington Day. Now, I'd like to share with you a little something. If you don't know, we're the Church of Korihor, spiritual community for godless people. Bet you didn't know that there was a spiritual community for godless people. Here we are. My office is a mess. Don't you dare look at that. Don't you dare look at that. If you think that's bad, you should see everything that's not in front of the camera. All right. I, as many of you will recall, have a partner who I love very much, a romantic partner, a life partner, a living partner. Yeah. A friend with benefits that includes more amorous affection than I think I've ever been shown by anybody in my whole life. Anyway, who gave me this the last time they were here. This, for those of you who are just listening, is a chocolate-colored rock, if you will. It's kind of mocha-ish, kind of swirling mocha-ish. It's kind of like my McDonald's iced caramel macchiato. And these are the moments where I think, does this person know me? And I think, does this person know me too well? And I think, does this person really love me a lot? Or maybe, does this person not love me at all? You see, Joseph Smith, you remember old Joseph Smith, right? Used a rock not entirely unlike this one to claim to be able to tell the story of Korihor, who is the namesake of our little church. While he was looking in his hat to to read gold plates, surely, that were inscribed in Hebrew, but with characters in Egyptian, that were obviously buried out in in a log out in the forest, or maybe under the barn. Depends on the day. Because obviously, if people were to see them, they would die. So, what does this mean? What does this mean? One of the little known things about Joseph Smith's seer stone is that it was one of at least 5 that he had, is believed to have had. And one of the major controversies in modern Mormonism is that there are some people who believe that when the Mormon church admitted that they had the chocolate colored stone and released pictures of the chocolate colored stone, that presumably was used to translate the Book of Mormon, among other things, they that the prophet of the church had obviously either lost his mind in admitting to this, or that he was senile, or that he was maybe a little bit, that he had missed a step in his inspiration. It's quite the controversy in Mormonism. Because, of course, we all grew up, those of us who grew up Mormon, grew up in the version of Mormonism where Joseph Smith is depicted in paintings, sitting in front of the gold plates with his hand, his face in his hand, and his finger on the inscriptions. And Oliver Cowdery sitting right next to him, not looking at the plates, obviously, because if he looked at the plates, he would die, or something bad would befall him anyway. And we would grow up looking at that. And if you really delve deeper into the story, you would find out that was just for illustrative purposes, that everybody who really knew the real process, the deeper meat doctrine, was that Joseph Smith actually wore a breastplate that was buried with the gold plates, and that there was a little arm attached to it somehow that had to which he could attach a pair of silver bows shaped kind of like eyeglasses that had 2 stones in them that were the Urim and Thummim, because of course Urim and Thummim is 2 different stones. And in Urim and Thummim, this goes back to the breastplate thing. That whole thing goes back to the Bible, and never mind, not important. But that he would look through these seer stones, the Urim and Thummim, and he could translate different languages. Yeah, sorry, MB. That's how that goes. And and he could look through them and he could translate languages. What is perhaps a little less known was that he also claimed to be able to look in seer stones and see the future. And that was quite something, considering that even his own death came as quite the shock, I'm sure. He foretold his own death, but several times over the course of his life. He was a bit of Joseph Smith was not so much for prophecy as he was for self-fulfilling prophecy. It was a bad thing, as Taylor Tomlinson taught us. But here's the thing. Even while he was looking in this stone, presumably one of the many stones he could use to look into and see the future, he told the story of Korihor in what is now Alma 30 of the modern Book of Mormon. It was in the Book of Mormon, the original Book of Mormon, Alma 16. And it is currently the book of the canon of the Church of Korihor we call the Legend of Korihor. Because here's a funny thing. Published in 1830, that document went into public domain 100 years ago. Good thing to know. That's when the copyright expired. So, anyways, so if I can look into this stone and see the future, I would be very much not in line with Korohorism. Because here's the thing. Even looking into this stone, presumably, or a stone like this, obviously, I don't have the original stone. Joseph Smith himself gave it away. Little known fact. The reason why the Mormon Church has it is because Joseph Smith gave it to Oliver Cowdery so that he could start giving revelations on his own and doing translation on his own. And about the time when recently after the time when he confessed to his father-in-law that he never saw anything in that stone. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. It's a secret. It breaks the illusion. And but telling the story of Korihor is curious because in the story of Korihor predicts that there is no God and there is no Christ. Or rather, he claims that there is no God and there shall be no Christ. But then says, in the same time, he says, for no man can know of anything which is to come. And that's curious. Because, of course, if no man can know of anything which is to come, he obviously can't know whether or not there will be a Christ. But what he does know is that nobody who claims that Christ will come in the future has any power to tell the future that he doesn't have. The point being, we also don't know the future. And for all that we know, the future is very bleak for the Church of Korihor. It may very well be that one day, maybe around the time of our first anniversary, we have to shut the whole thing down and pretend like it never happened, never speak of it again. And at which point, I will have to assess, what the hell am I doing with my life? And maybe you will too. But the thing here is that I just don't see that happening. I can't see the future. This stone doesn't give me shit. But it does remind me that one person loves me, maybe. A lot, maybe. No, definitely. But the future for the Church of Korihor in the month of August got a lot brighter. I'll tell you why. In August of 2025, we released 5 Godless hymns, including our very popular hymns like Mothers in Every Cell and The Quiet Fight. We gained a few new contributors and we lost a few contributors. And we wished one important member of our clergy very well on her way in the future, away from the Church of Korihor. Among the several cracks in the porcelain of our little spiritual community, I saw that we had technical challenges that were making Korohorism too dependent on me. I'm, this here, that there. I am happy to serve. But this is getting bigger than me. And it's grown to a point where it's really unfair that it's so much about me. And not unfair to me, obviously, but more unfair to everybody else. Maybe also a little unfair to me. But what we're doing here is supposed to be about a community and a community project. And what I have not managed to do in the past is to create the technical space and the meeting space where more people will be able to stand up and fulfill roles in the Church of Korihor in the future and the work that we are doing. So that's why in August I committed that we would engage in a project of modernizing the tech. We had to start developing new ways for people to engage in the Church of Korihor and to participate in what we're doing. So this is how we are spreading around the heavy lifting, creating opportunities for other people to step up and to be a part of our community and to enjoy the community as it is. And to enjoy what our work is in trying to make painful lives worth living. I think it's the most rewarding thing I've done in my life. It's the most frustrating thing. That's not true. It's not the most frustrating thing. The most frustrating thing I've done in my life is trying to improve myself, probably. But that's kind of a part of it for me. But I spent the last few weeks looking into the future, and this is the progress that we are going to make starting right now. Starting now, we are going to improve the personal experience of making our own lives worth living. I think this is really important. You know, I've turned many times lately inwardly to thinking and contemplating about what exactly is it that we are offering? What is it that the Church of Korihor gives to people? I'm glad that people enjoy our hymns. That's definitely been a big offering that we didn't expect, but that has become a big part of what we do, and I love that. I absolutely love that. You know, I haven't. I need to re-release it. I never really fully released it. There was an episode of Hellfire Agency I did about Joe Hill. Joe Hill was a labor activist and labor organizer who was murdered by the state of Utah. And basically, he was framed for murder because he was organizing Swedish immigrants here in Utah, many of whom came here either because they or their families converted to Mormonism. And they started, when they got here, to what was supposed to be Zion, where there were no poor among them. That's the way Mormon scripture describes it. They were called Zion, and there were no poor among them. And lo and behold, got here and found out, if you want to eat, you're going to have to go work in the mines, coal mines, silver mines, especially. And many of them started to die in these mines. There was including one coal mine disaster that killed, if my memory serves, it's been about a year since I made this episode, that I'm going to have to re-release. It's been a full-time job getting some of these new enhancements to the Church of Korihor. I have only barely been able to work on Hellfire Agency at all. If my memory serves correctly, it was some 200 Swedish immigrants who died in a coal mine explosion. And some of these were very young. I don't know that it's documented how young, but the story goes that they were. In some cases, I talked to a historian, who we talked about this issue. He had looked into it, and he said there were documented cases in this mine explosion where every male member of a family died in this disaster. And it was about that time that a group, labor activist group, or a union called the IWW, more famously known as the Wobblies, came to Utah and started organizing coal miners and kitchen staff and so forth. This was during the big uptick of the great socialist uprising in America that came to be known as unions and unionism. And in that process, a couple of very interesting things happened while I was doing research on this. One was to see how atheism and unions came up hand in hand in this movement. Before that, the labor activism movement was largely about opposing slavery. And in opposing slavery, many of the voices, the most prominent voices, were preachers and Christians who rose up to oppose slavery, as long as slavery was chattel slavery or owning people. There are still some people in the labor community, in the labor world, people who will tell you the story of labor. Michael Wolff. Michael Wolff? What's his name? Why names all of a sudden? Anyway, Dr. Wolff says that one of the major issues is that there were two kinds of people in the abolitionist movement. One were people who believed that it was wrong for human beings to be property. The other was that they believed that it was wrong to force people to compel people to use labor to prove that they deserved to exist, to prove that they deserved to live on this planet Earth and to be a part of this community. This whole idea that if you don't work, you don't eat, when there's plenty enough resources to go around, and we need people to be able to do work that's other than just making shit, just making food, making clothes, making ships, making rope, making things. It's got to be about making art. It's got to be about making music. It's got to be about making more. That's why when the labor movement really kicked up into high gear, women were at the forefront of creating what became unions, especially women who worked in New England as seamstresses, as laundresses. Maybe I'll degender some of this. Maybe I'll gender neuter some of this. Women who worked cooking, cleaning, washing things for the rich, and educating their children and caring for their children. And it was these women who rose up in a new movement to say, you can continue to treat us like you have been, but if it's going to come down to our being able to provide for our families and provide for ourselves and provide for a future, it might be we might be better off just not showing up to work anymore. And so women led some of the most significant strikes of the early 20th century. And it was famously one of them who was photographed, and her photograph published in the papers. She was wearing a sandwich board that said on the front of it, bread, yes. Bread, yes, but roses too. And she became the inspiration. That board became the inspiration behind the song that was that's Bread and Roses. And that song now is sung all over the world. In America, we hardly even know, most people, that this song exists, that it was about how labor modernized in this country and among these people and among women. Feminism and union activism were tied at the hip. Joe Hill was part of that. He was in that same movement. In fact, some of the most important women in the movement were very close friends of his who advocated and fought for him, even went as far as going to the White House to beg the president of the United States to give him clemency so that he could live, trying to convince the government that this man was quite obviously framed. And the thing that Joe Hill did, Joe Hill never hurt a soul. And the thing that he really did that pissed people off was that he would organize ordinary people to unionize. But in addition to that, the way he did it was to get them to sing. Because Joe Hill, among all, first and foremost, he was a painter from back in his days in Sweden before he immigrated to the United States. And he was a poet. And famously, when he got to America, he and his brother got separated. Hello, Jules, Lisa, MB. Good to see you guys here. He got to America, and he and his brother had emigrated together, and they tried to find work in New York and couldn't really find any, and came to discover that pretty much all the work in America was outside of New York. There were plenty of immigrants in New York, not enough work to go around. And never mind the fact that at the same time, there was a serious anti-immigrant sentiment in America's labor movement, in American business. And so, they would have, you're familiar probably with Nina signs that were posted on in doors that meant no Irish need apply, or no Italians need apply, no immigrants need apply. That's how deep America's anti-immigrant sentiment goes, surprisingly, considering that we have always seemingly prided ourselves on being a nation of immigrants. And yet, look how we have always treated immigrants. So there are ways that we could do better. There are ways that we could live up to our propaganda better, and ways in which we could just let some of that propaganda go. And it just doesn't do us any good to lie to ourselves about it. Joel Hillstrom was his actual name. He shortened it to make it more Americanized. Instead of Joel, he went by Joe. And instead of Hillstrom, he went by Hill, Joe Hill. His brother had gone out into the country to go look for work and never heard from again. As far as I know, they still don't know what happened to Joe Hill's brother. So he got out there and he started to hop on the rails. He started to, get onto the railroad and sneak into boxcars and go across the country looking for work and looking for some way to make ends meet. And it was while he was doing that, he met some bums. Back in the day of labor activism, bumming was a way of saying, was considered like a compassionate act. It was something that union activists like the Wobblies, especially the Wobblies, who were the biggest union in the world at the time, they would go from town to town looking for work. They would get work wherever they could, in whatever jobs they could. And when they weren't working, and then while they were working these kind of really low paying, really bad labor jobs, they would start grumbling and talking to the other workers, and they would get them to try and they would try to organize unions in these communities. And then once they had the union established and ready to go, especially after the winter months, when like it or not, if you're going to have to get indoors if you're going to continue to live like this, moving from place to place, they would have to find some place to keep warm for the winter. Then once the warmer months came about, then it was considered compassion, and it was considered the real activist work was to stop working, so that those jobs that you had taken up in that community would become available. And now, after they had unionized and organized the unions, now the employers would have to go out into the community and hire new workers, and those workers would have to join the union in order to join. And then that's how they would organize unions, and that's how unions came about. So the Wobblies who would travel on the railroad, when it got to be warmer months, they would they'd get back on the railroad and keep going. And that was referred to as bumming, or going on the bum, or being on the bum. And that's where bums come from. The habit of calling it being a bum. And once again, another thing that got misconstrued in American vocabulary is that when these bums would come to, it was considered, again, an act of compassion, an act of solidarity, that if these bums were coming through the area and came up to your farm or came up to your house and came up to, and said, hey, we're hungry and we're not working, to keep them from working, taking up jobs that could be going to people in your community. Instead, if they came up to you and said, hey, do you think you could spare a swallow of liquor? Do you think you could spare a bite of bread? Something that you were going to throw out anyway, anything that you have, that instead of throwing it out, we'll take it. We're that hungry. And so that was going on the bum. People, they would ask you, and they would go up and they would ask strangers to lend them a hand so that they could keep moving. And so they didn't end up having to settle and take up jobs that could be going to people in the community. And so that's what was going on the bum meant. They even wrote a song that may or may not have been written, or that I think Joe Hill is credited with having written one version of it. But there's this song, I forget who was it Tresco? One of the other guys in the movement actually wrote the song, but they called the song was called Hallelujah, I'm a Bum. And it was a pretty interesting song. If you look into the history of the music of the labor movement, it's a fascinating story. Joe Hill was at the head of that because at the time, one of the major voices, two major institutions of religion in America were really spearheading the movement to kill the labor movement, and two Christian churches. And one of those was the Salvation Army, and the other one was the Mormon Church. There, of course, were other conservative, people who were fearful of socialists in other religious movements, but it was really organized in this anti-labor activism in the Salvation Army and in the Mormon Church. And the Salvation Army, it really bothered Joe Hill, because when he hooked up with the Wobblies and he started going on the bum and started going around doing labor activism, union organizing, they would go out there and they would set up, he and his union brothers, fellow Wobblies, they would set up a makeshift stage on a corner to make their voices carry. And they would basically preach little mini sermons. And in the process, there's a lot of this. Well, let me keep going with this. The stage that they would set up soap boxes. They would take detergent crates that they stole from behind department stores, and they would stack them up, and then they would climb up on top of that, this little makeshift stage, and start preaching to, my fellow workers, we got to blah, 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 blah. And they would give their speech about why we all have to stick together and unionize. And the police would come along and they would start pulling whoever was up on the soapboxes. That's, by the way, where the phrase "to get up on your soapbox" comes from. And they would take whoever was standing on the soapboxes and pull them down and arrest them. And as soon as that person gets pulled down, somebody else would stand up and take his place. Then they'd arrest that guy, and then they'd arrest the person who stands up. Then they'd just keep climbing up on top of the soapboxes and start preaching about the union. And meanwhile, across the street in the town square where they would set up, you would have the Salvation Army. They would set up with their little choir, and they would sing their favorite song to sing out on the corner, in the sweet by and by. In the sweet by and by. My voice isn't great right now. I'm having some kind of allergic reaction. Anyway, you know the one. And while the police were arresting the Wobblies for preaching and saying that they were disturbing the peace, that's the reason why there are statutes for disturbing the peace, which, because it sounds much better than because we don't really believe in the First Amendment. These guys, while they were getting arrested, Joe Hill asked a police officer, "Why don't you arrest them for disturbing the peace? They're making a racket across the street, these Salvation Army people." And the officer apparently told him, "Well, they're singing. So how's that not disturbing the peace?" He says, "Well, singing is beautiful. Everyone appreciates singing." "Oh, really?" And so Joe Hill sat down with a pen and paper. By the way, he would get arrested too. They'd all get arrested. But the thing that was curious, they were able to recruit enough lawyers into the labor movement that everybody got a brief education. First of all, there was no one signs, everything's fine. Nobody talks, everybody walks, right? The police ask you, "Tell us exactly what happened here." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, exactly. What were you doing? What was happening?" I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm being held against my will. I don't know what you're talking about. "Okay, you and your buddies were on the corner and you were arrested by you people. We didn't do anything wrong." It was, nobody talks, everyone walks. Nobody signs, everything's fine. And they said, because here's the thing that you have to understand about the American. Yes, it was about the time of World War I. And that was a big part of it. At the time, one of the biggest political leaders, names are run out of my brain right now. One of the biggest political leaders in America at the time was the head of the Socialist Party, and who was running for president. And he was actually arrested because they were protesting against America's involvement in World War I. So yes, same movement, Lisa. And they got there and they started to. So what the lawyers would make them understand was, the thing is, in America they can't convict you without a jury trial, and America still had not efficiently, really to this day, still has not efficiently managed to create a manageable system for organizing a jury of your peers, or what that really even means. And so in order to indict all these people, then take them to trial, then get a jury, organize a jury, basically they have to beg you down to just plead guilty. If you just plead guilty and give it to you, we'll make it easier on you, because it's so expensive and so difficult to organize to get that to try all these people, that if they all insist on going to a jury trial and don't tell the police or the prosecutors anything useful, then eventually they're just going to have to let you go, because they're not going to spend the money to prosecute you if it's just to persecute you. So everybody shuts up. Nobody don't give them anything that they can use against you, and don't be and whenever you are asked, don't you want to, get out of here, you just tell them, "I don't know what you're talking about, but I definitely want a jury trial as soon as possible, please." And that's how they were able to get going from place to place. The police would take them out, beat the shit out of them, and then let them go. And that was how that's how the labor activism work really continued. But along the way, Joe Hill discovered that there was really a lot of power in singing. And so he took that song, In the Sweet By and By, and he wrote an alternate version of it that they could sing from on top of their soapboxes. And this song introduced another phrase that is become common parlance in America, and that is the phrase pie in the sky. The song is called The Preacher and the Slave. And the Preacher and the Slave, set to In the Sweet By and By, it was sung Baptist style, which means that the person singing would sing one line and the congregation would sing back the corresponding line, and another line, a higher line. So I'm gonna try and remember it off the top of my head. So the singer would sing, "You will eat," and then everybody would respond and go, "You will eat by and by, by and by, in that glorious land above the sky." And then you repeat back, "Way up high, work and pray, work and pray, live on hay, live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die." And then those who feel so inclined, because you will go to hell for it, would shout, "That's a lie." And I love that. I remember when I was learning about this, I was doing Blood Atonement, my podcast series about murder among the Mormons, but I also was getting really salty about the way at the time about how this country really has a significant problem with the way that both major parties, and I'm not telling anybody how to vote, I don't do that, but it's a factual statement that both major parties that control politics in this country couldn't give the remotest of fucks about how ordinary people are living and making ends meet in this country. I don't know about you, but me personally, this is my personal feeling, I'm getting pretty damn salty about it. And it was about that time that I was working on this episode of Hellfire Agency. It became a couple of episodes of Hellfire Agency. That I realized I'd stumbled across one of the most major influences in the history of American atheism to get snuffed out. And Joe Hill never made a big deal about the fact that he didn't believe in God, but he very plainly didn't. And his music was meant to mock religion. And as I looked further into it, the more I realized that it was like I felt like a whole history. I who have been, I'm the grandson of Union people, at least on one side of my family. I definitely grew up a Reaganite. Before MAGA was MAGA, we were making America great again in the Mormon conservative community. Grew up surrounded by white Mormons who, suburbanites who had no idea. We had no idea about this movement. But I prided myself on that. As an adult, I had learned a lot about the importance of unions and the importance of organized labor. I had no idea, however, how closely tied the history of atheism and the history of labor organizing really were in this country, because it was the conservative Christians who were fighting against the unions, and has been from the beginning. And it was largely Christian conservatives who had fought against abolition, who had fought for slavery and used their rhetoric to fight for slavery before what we now know as the modern labor movement, which really started with abolitionism. Sorry, I've got this bad allergies. But Joe Hill was a part of that. And it was when there's a famous song, again, in the labor movement. And again, this is not just in America now. They sing this song in Moscow. They sang it in Moscow during the Soviet Union. They sang it, in France when communism was and socialism were really coming up in France. Um, some of the most famous places, famous concerts that were organized for labor activism, they sang this song about Joe Hill, and it was called Joe Hill. And it's a beautiful song. If you get a chance, I would sing it for you if I didn't feel like ass. But it's a great song in memory of Joe Hill. And it starts out, I dreamt I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. There's a whole history of how working class people and atheism came up in America in the 20th century and shaped labor activism for the whole world and changed the world in a real sense. One of the most notorious labor activists uh, and voices for labor was Woody Guthrie. And Woody Guthrie, I never knew him. I don't know him to have been particularly notorious for his atheism. I don't even know that he necessarily considered himself an atheist. Nonetheless, one of the interesting things about Woody Guthrie, if you've seen the movie with Timothy Chalamet and Ed Norton, about who am I thinking of? Why names? Big 45 guys, it's just not the same. This recent movie, A Complete Unknown. There's a character in there you'll see, if you don't know the history of music of labor, you might not recognize, but you would recognize who this person was by some of the things that have not quite been snuffed out of history about him. There's a guy named Woody Guthrie. And in the movie, you see he doesn't speak because at the end of his life, he'd lost his voice. He died really young, but he spent all of his life on the bum. He would go out and he would work where he could, and then he would sing and wherever he went. And any of it, the guy himself, Woody Guthrie, he used to sing. He used to carry a guitar with him wherever he went. On which, back when fascism was on the rise, he wrote on his guitar, he would write, "This machine kills fascists." And he wrote a song just specifically for the government to raise the army against fascism. Again, labor activism was very much against America's involvement in World War I. By the time World War II rolled around, that rhetoric had changed, because in World War I, it was just about going off fighting rich men's wars so that rich men could get richer, and so that people who were hungry, you could feed more and more of them as cannon fodder to the war. And so that's why they were against it. The movie is A Complete Unknown. What's the guy's name? Bob Dylan. Shit. What's wrong with me? Thank you, MB. And in any event, Bob Dylan loved Woody Guthrie. He was one of the best. I mean, really, he's one of the most important people in the history of folk music, but also in labor activism. I don't know if you remember. You'll know who Woody Guthrie is. One of the most famous songs that he wrote was "This Land Is My Land, This Land Is Your Land," and of course, that there was a concerted effort among conservative America to get this song. Those of us who grew up in the 70s, 80s, we grew up singing this song in school. That was a song that you sang in school. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. And, there was a concerted effort to get that shut down, to get them to stop teaching Woody Guthrie's music to children. Because if you sing that song as it gets to the third verse, there are different versions of Woody Guthrie published. Folk music was like that. You would sing it the way it was written, but then you would kind of improvise it. You would sing it, you would make up new verses of it, which was part of what made it fun. And one of the verses that he wrote went, as I was walking, oh shoot, now I remember. I wish I had written this. I wish I'd planned this part of the sermon. This is I'm kind of riffing off of his just because I'm so passionate about it. But anyway, there's this verse of the song that goes, as I was walking, I saw a sign that said private property. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. This land was made for you and me. As you can imagine, back in the days of Reaganism, they didn't exactly relish us kids learning about this song with rhetoric like that. So it was curious. But back in the 40s, it was a different game. Okay. When after Pearl Harbor, it was Woody Guthrie that the U.S. Army sent around the country with his guitar that said, "This machine kills fascists," singing songs about why it was in the interest of everyone to go and fight against the fascists. And the song that they had organized, that he had written for that, was called "Tear the Fascists Down." And it's a beautiful song. It's an incredible song that you can still find on YouTube. Again, this is a part of the history that got snuffed out of the whole argument. We look back and see the nostalgia of World War II. It's all in Steven Spielberg movies, which I'm not knocking those. I love Steven Spielberg movies. And, we remember a nostalgic version of World War II that's propaganda. Bluntly. I mean, it's all propaganda. But the original propaganda was this song, "Tear the Fascists Down." And the song celebrates the movement, the positive movement being made to fight against fascism, that the pioneers against fascism were the Russians, the Soviets, and the Chinese, and that America would jump in to free France and England from the control of fascism. And how does the song go? The chorus of the song goes, there's London in ruins and Paris in chains. Good people, what are we waiting on? And he says, so I thank the Soviets and the mighty Chinese vets, allies the whole wide world around. To the battling British, thanks. You can have 10 million Yanks if it takes them to tear those fascists down, down, down. If it takes them to tear those fascists down. And that all came out of the labor movement. It was part of solidarity from the labor movement to link arms with actual socialists and actual communists all over the world at a time when it was becoming increasingly unpopular to be labeled a socialist. But at that time, the labor activists saw that these were organized. Maybe there were problems with the way the Soviets were organized, that for sure. There were problems with the way the Chinese were organizing, that for sure. There were problems, yeah. There were problems with the way it was being done in America. But if the fight needed to be brought to Hitler and the fascists, the ones bringing the fight were these people. Were organized, ordinary working people, whatever the label for them was. And music was at the heart of that. When I started the Church of Korihor, it was in the same weeks when I started putting it together that I was learning about Joe Hill, and embarrassed, surprised, and in the end, proud of how much I had learned about Joe Hill and about the history of music and folk music as part of the labor movement. and the movement against fascism, and realized in this day and age, this was in November of 2024, and I said, we need more than ever before to have a movement made of music to talk about the important message that there are no gods. We are here in this for each other. And the people who would sell you God in almost every instance, are going to be the same people who are actually representing corporate propaganda and corporatized political propaganda. And if we're going to resist them, we need to have music that the ordinary people can sing. And part of that is going to be remembering the old music of the old movement. But part of it also, the best way to honor that movement is to do what they did and make songs that mock their songs. And so that's when the first song that I wrote for the Church of Korihor, when I came up with this idea and I came upstairs to Molly, I'm like, you won't believe this. I followed Joe Hill's example and I wrote a song that has a chorus sung in Baptist style, and takes a hymn and steals a hymn from the Christians. And the hymn that I had chosen was "How Great Thou Art." But the song went, "O Korihor." I had not become quite famous for writing the book, The Korihor Argument, about why I left Mormonism. But everybody who knows who I am, I probably still today knows that my whole public persona has come up around the book, The Korihor Argument, A Missionary's Journey Out of Mormonism. And I said, we should have one that's just about Korihor. In fact, it wasn't until I wrote O Korihor, and I said, I'm going to do it. We're just going to call it the Church of Korihor, because it's so important to have a legend that you can organize the movement around, but that you don't actually use the reputation of a real living person who never gave their permission for that. So otherwise, it would have been the Church of Carl Sagan. I've said that many times, or the Church of Christopher Hitchens. But both of those guys would have hated that. Korihor doesn't exist, so we can do what we want with him. He's a legend. And I wrote this song called "O Korihor," and I wrote it to "How Great Thou Art." By the time I put it through Suno and said, "Oh, it's just set to the tune "How Great Thou Art," and it was like it didn't know what to do with that. I was like, okay, we'll just do it in some way so that I have something to play on the day of my first Godless sermon. I don't remember if I actually finished it in time for the first Godless sermon. I think so. I don't remember, but it was in that same time period. I wrote this song and said, this could be a fun song that we could organize, that we could use to pull together and everybody get in the spirit of what we're trying to do here. And I tried to put as much of the idealism of Korihor and why Korihor was significant in what I wanted to create in the world, if I was going to create something in the world to organize people around, and put it all in one central theme. And that song became the anthem of the Church of Korihor. And it turns out Suno wrote a much better melody for it than the Christians ever could. So screw that "How Great Thou Art" stuff. From that day until this day, music has been at a central focus in what we're doing at the Church of Korihor. The Church of Korihor is a musical place, a musical movement. And I love that because it honors our roots. It honors the roots of atheism and the way that atheism became acknowledged in the commonplace, and the anti-religious atheism, particularly anti-theism, became a commonplace part of the voice for working people to get better treatment in their work, and at the same time, of resisting against fascism and against government overreach, because they can't organize, they can't legislate against us and pretend that they still believe in the separation of church and state. Now they're not even trying anymore. They can't organize against us and legislate against us, imprison us, kill us, hurt us, and or in any way, and still pretend that they believe in freedom of religion and that they believe in democracy. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but the people who feel that way, they're increasingly giving up on believing in democracy. They're increasingly proud of advertising to the world that they don't believe in democracy. And so while the voice that is trying to quash everything that makes freedom truly great, real freedom, which is the freedom to believe and to think like you want, the freedom to speak and say what you want, and to be a part of a voice in a crowd of voices that's going to come together to try and make life better for one another, to honor this societal contract that makes states, governments, communities, people, a people worth existing. In Spanish, there's a separate word for people who are a people. That word is pueblo. We were part of it from the beginning, by the way. One of the big hubs for labor activism and for modernizing labor in the world was New Mexico. We've been here from the beginning, by the way. Been a part of this. I don't live in New Mexico. I live in Utah, but my family's from New Mexico. And we have corahors in New Mexico. I don't know if you knew. This is a musical movement. And the future is going to be, in the future, our godless hymns are going to play an even bigger role in where we're going to go and who we are becoming. So that's two things that I really wanted to establish about how we are changing as of August, and the future of Korahorism is being shaped. One is that we launched a hymn page at the Church of Korahor where people can go and listen to all of our published hymns. In the future, starting in September, my plan is to start publishing some of those hymns, or at least a separate album of hymns, also on Spotify, so that when people want to listen to it, they can listen to it on Spotify. And then hopefully we can figure out a way to kind of monetize that so that we can get a little more revenue coming in, because we kind of desperately need it. And so more and more of our music is going to become available to the wider marketplace, so that more and more people come to be aware about our movement, spreading godless hymns, including, yes, fun, snarky hymns like More Money Than God and Lick My Cupcake, and what else do we have? We have so many now. Those are going to be big parts of how people are going to come to know what the Church of Korahor is. In fact, I recently published on our Facebook page for the Church of Korahor, and I published it on our semi-official page on TikTok, which is just under my name for the time being. I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to do the business side of the church's page on TikTok. That I'd put a challenge out there to any brave Exmo soul to publish a sing-along where you can, just play that video and then do the duet, whatever the duet thing is called. It's like a remix or whatever on Facebook, whatever, and just duet singing along with "Lick My Cupcake." And just make it fun. Just have a great time with it. I think it would be fun if that became like a trending thing. We could make more and more songs to celebrate healing from trauma, religious trauma, and really take off with this. But also in the future, I mean, up until now, between Suno and I've written pretty much every Godless hymn. And there are a few people in our community who are very good at this, not only writing songs and publishing them where the robots are singing for us. We love our robot singers. I don't want to say anything bad about them. It's been great, frankly. It's been a way that we have been able to grow what we're doing here faster than we ever would have had we had to organize people to compose music, sheet music, write, write and compose and play the instruments, the instrumental tracks, and people to sing. Meanwhile, however, I've had at least 3 people who are professional singers and musicians approach me since we started this, saying that they wanted to know who was singing these incredible songs and how we had organized them so well, and and so forth. And they're all a little bit dismayed to learn that we just use AI to generate them. The little Church of Korihor doesn't really have a lot of people, doesn't have a lot of money. We're still growing. We're still trying to take off here. So we don't have time to wait for the movement to grow before we make killer hymns. And so we're just taking advantage of the AI while we can. If I could, but to every one of them I have mentioned, and what I do truly passionately believe in is that the future of our movement is going to be people singing godless hymns and people writing godless hymns, and people outside of the brain that sits between these 2 ears. I want to see opportunities for music to become a way in which people can contribute to the Church of Korihor. So starting in September, I'm going to create, on the technical side, now that I'm getting close to figuring out all the technical aspects of how we can do this. We might have to do it kind of podunk for a while, like, hey, just send me this on, just Facebook message me it, or just send it to me on, just post it onto the community tab at the church or whatever. Right? I love this, MB. This is exactly what I'm saying. Imagine for a moment what it might be like that people every month, we could have people submitting hymns for the Church of Korihor to be canonized by the Church of Korihor and become part of our Godless hymnal, that I will be surprised to hear. You can sing it, you can play it, you can compose it, you can throw it into Suno and have Suno compose it and make it. And I have one already, but I'm going to make an updated version. On the Church of Korihor's website, I'm going to be putting on the back end an instructional video for how you can, for how I use Suno to create godless hymns so that more people can get in on this. I'm not going to say I'm going to approve all of them to be part of our hymnal. I might give some guidance from here and there, but to be honest with you, I'm not likely to be very strict on it. If it makes me smile, it makes me laugh, if it makes you feel good, if it makes people feel good and want to be a part of this, we'll put it together. A little note about Joe Hill before we finish with that. I mentioned that Joe Hill wrote The Preacher and the Slave. It was not the last hymn that he wrote. As a matter of fact, I think he wrote Solidarity Forever, which of course is, if you've ever been involved in union activism, you would know that one. But there was a hymnal that the Wobblies put together, and Joe Hill became the guy who was in charge of putting all of the music together and publishing it and distributing it all throughout the country. And his music that he would compose, a lot of it, songs that he had written on the melodies of hymns, became the music of the whole labor movement. They're sung all over the world. And they when Joe Hill died, maybe I won't give away too much of this because I do want to republish these episodes about Joe Hill. When Joe Hill was executed by firing squad here in Utah, it was a big, terrifying to do in Salt Lake City. They wouldn't. He had asked he had asked several times to be released, to get clemency, to get pardoned. When that wasn't going to work, and he finally gave up and said, "Okay, this is, they've beaten me." He wrote to his fellow brothers and sisters in the unions, and Gurley was the woman. The first head of a political party who was a woman was the head of the Communist Party, and it's Elizabeth Gurley. Is that her name, Elizabeth Gurley? Who was the person who went to, if I remember correctly, went to the governor of Utah and went to the president of the United States to try and convince them, please give this man a pardon. He obviously has been framed, and even if he isn't, he's so important to the movement. At least give him some kind of clemency. And they wouldn't budge on it. And it was clear to the Wobblies, clear to the union activists, that this man was being sacrificed. He was a message from the state to the workers saying, we're not going to put up with this. And what happened was, after Joe Hill was executed, and none of his friends were allowed to be there, even though that was like against the law, I'm pretty sure. And he was promised that his friends would be allowed to be there to support him at the end when they actually pulled the trigger. And one of the things that they shot him. I actually, in this episode of Hellfire Agency, I went up to the place where they shot him. It's now one of the most beautiful parks in Utah, but it was the Utah State Prison at the time. They actually lined up as a firing squad. What they would do is they would distribute rifles, and one of the rifles would have a blank in it, and the other ones did not. The other ones were, loaded with live ammo, and they didn't. And supposedly, you wouldn't know which one had the blank in it, so that every person in the firing squad could give himself the permission to pull the trigger by saying, mine is the one that has the blank in it, because it was that difficult to convince human beings to line up the sights at another human being and pull the trigger. Anyway, just curious to think about when you think about this. Joe Hill died, and they organized a rebel funeral for him. And that funeral, people came from all over the country. So many people. It was published in the paper how terrifying it was, and how so many of them were so dirty and they're poor, and how many of them are immigrants, and all these people from all over the country poured into Salt Lake City and clogged up the streets, just lined up along the streets as they took Joe Hill's body from the memorial house, the funeral house in Salt Lake, down to Temple Square, where there was the train station that went back out of town, would take him back to Chicago so he could be buried. Because in the letter that he had written to his friends, after he had given up that he was not going to survive, that they were going to get him, that this was the end, he said, please make sure that they ship my body back to Chicago, because I wouldn't be caught dead in Utah. They had him cremated, and they took his remains back to Chicago. And eventually, by the way, what they did is they took his remains, they took his ashes, they took a portion of them, and they distributed them to chapters of the International Workers of the World, the Wobblies, all over the country. And in every different headquarters, they had a little shrine to Joe Hill. When they eventually raided all of these chapters of the Wobblies, the government would ransack the place. The police would ransack these places, shutting down the Wobblies from actively working in the area. I mean, which is massively illegal. It wasn't until many years later that the government informed them informed the Wobblies, by the way, while we were cleaning house of some old, getting rid of some old evidence and things that weren't, cases that were no longer being pursued. And we started to clear house of some of our old storage. We happened to find some of these ashes. And it turns out, they said, it may be that during these FBI raids of these Wobblies chapters, when we found remains of Joe Hill, we just kind of took them. And it was like, are you freaking kidding me? Wait a minute. You just stole Joe Hill's ashes? What the hell for? And it was just kind of like, to be dicks, kind of. It was like, what? And so they had contacted the Wobblies, who still exist, and told them, do you want them back? It's like, hell yes, we want them back. God, what? Who are you people? This was decades later. And just a few years ago, I want to say it was like 2021, they took those ashes that the government had confiscated and they buried them in Utah and put a memorial up there. That was about the same time that here in Utah, they had organized to put up a memorial at the place where Joe Hill was shot. And that's the place where I went to record this episode of Hellfire Agency. I really ought to re-release that episode soon. I was standing there with my phone recording this episode that I had written, and I was still kind of coming up with a good system for writing and publishing, recording and publishing episodes for Hellfire Agency. And more than one person up in, this is out in Eastern Salt Lake. I want to say it's technically Sugar House. Anyway, more than one person came by and saw me recording. And I actually became a little distracting, a little difficult to get through all my recordings. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, what's happening? I'm like, oh, I'm a podcaster. I do this true crime podcast. And I'm like, oh, and they're like, oh, and these people who are walking, this is a very popular park to go taking your dogs to walk. Salt Lake is a very dog friendly area, surprisingly. I don't know if that's surprising. I don't know why it's surprising. It surprised me. It's like there are dogs everywhere. People take their dogs walking, and people are walking their dogs who had walked past this memorial dozens of times, hundreds of times, who knows how many often. They're like, when I walk past this memorial every day, they'll say sometimes they're like, I had no idea who this person was. And I told them the story of Joe Hill, and they were fascinating, just enthralled with it. And I realized this story has power. People need to know the story of Joe Hill. Anyway, who said famously that he would not be caught dead in Utah. Well, when they got him almost all the way to the border, bringing him back, which was part of the joke, and they buried him, and they took the last of his remains. They buried them in Colorado just recently. And anyways, so in the future, I'd like to see a lot of hymns for the Church of Korihor that are written by somebody other than me. And I think it's a great opportunity for somebody out there, as long as it's done in the spirit of, it's not something that I expect anybody to do, that you should feel obligated to do or something like that. part of the reason why I do the Godless hymns, is because I'm passionate about it and I love it. And if you're passionate about it and you catch the spirit of it, give it a try and let's see what happens. And if you say, I'm not going to do it the way that Joe does it, okay, cool. Do it do it in your way. And if you have poured a lot of heart into it and it conforms with the messaging of what we're doing here, which, is pretty wide open. And it makes your heart beat faster. It makes you more excited about this movement and about what we're doing here, and you want to contribute it, you be pretty sure I'm going to say, hell yeah, let's publish this thing. Let's make it officially part of our hymnal, because I think music is going to be a big part of the future of the Church of Korihor. The other thing, and those of you who were part of my 5-hour live stream on Friday night already know about this, is that I have been working on Overview. Overview, those of you who aren't aware, is our experiment in contemplative meditation for godless people. We are planning to do a lot more science, if you will. Basically, Overview is our community-wide laboratory for developing a meditation practice for godless people that uses actual science to improve upon the way meditation is done. My hope is that within a year to 2 years, we'll actually be able to sponsor studies into how Overview has quickly become the best way to practice, especially compassionate meditation. While I was working on this, however, I came to realize I published one version of Overview that I called the Solar Maypole. And as soon as I published it, I was like, I like it. I don't know that I love it. And there are technical problems with it, because one of the major concerns I have is that while music is a wonderful and essential part of what we're doing with hymns, I know that a lot of people who do guided meditation don't like to have music, even though there is actual science that shows that some music balanced at, what do we say, 432 hertz, excuse me, is actually good at inducing a meditative space that actually makes meditation more effective. But if it distracts you, then it distracts you. And at what volume, this is like the oldest problem I have as a video producer, is that some people, I find that people hear music in the background and spoken word, in the background behind the spoken word. People hear it at different mixes of volume and can comprehend voices differently, and it's as unique as the pair of ears that are listening to it, depending on what level the music is at. And so I can balance the music so that it fits better in the background and it's not as distracting. But at the same time, sometimes, especially if we're going to experiment with using like binaural beats and things like this, which is going to be a big part, kind of sound bath technology kind of stuff, because that actually does appear to have a difference. I don't know how much science we actually have yet. I'm planning to do a lot more research on it, of how these different sounds are affect the mind while you're trying to meditate. And so I just knew that this idea that came to me back when I started this concept Overview, it was going to be critically important that people could control the volume of the music and the volume of the voice track separately. So I got online and I looked up different players and tried to find one that we could embed on the website that would play 2 tracks synchronized at the same time, but play them as separate tracks simultaneously where you could adjust the volume. And for the life of me, I couldn't find anything even remotely like that. And so I decided to design one and build one using artificial intelligence. I tried several times to do this using ChatGPT, tell me how you would do this. And no, and it became so complicated and messy, I gave up several times. And then finally, I just purchased a subscription to an account on this software called Replit that I had heard was really good, that I tinkered around with, and came to find it was easy for it to build the software that actually did this. And so right now it's still under construction on the Church of Korihor because I'm still having trouble getting it to hook up to the database at Wix, where we host all of our websites. Our website, don't tell anybody. We'll just put here on the internet where nobody knows. And I'm trying to get it to connect to the database. Everything else about it appears to work. We won't know until we actually successfully link it up to the database. And I've been struggling with this for about a week, but I feel like I'm getting closer. I think we're actually getting them. Again, I don't write code. This is a no-code solution to a problem because I don't have the resources to hire somebody to come in and help us to fix this. But I'm getting close. I feel like I've managed to solve a lot of the problems, and I'm really excited about it. Those of you who are on Friday's live stream know that I demonstrated how it works, and that there's basically a filtering system that where we separate out the overviews, the meditation sessions, by color. And the colors are labeled with different names. Should I just show it to you? I know I showed this on Friday. So those of you who are here on Friday, pretend that you're seeing it for the first time. How about that? I'm going to share my screen here. If you are leaving me comments, don't be surprised if I don't see them. Okay. So when a person gets onto korihor.org, they can go over to overview. It's the first thing, even though it's still under construction, it's the first thing. This is the way it looks so far. I'm much better at designing the way things look than designing the way they work. So this is overview as it looks now. And what happens is I designed it so that if you pull up, if you want to go wound up, like if you're getting a start to your day, and you pull down if you want to wind down, like if you're going to sleep or if you're going into a contemplative practice, you want to do some inner child work or something like that. Or you can leave it in the middle if what you're trying to accomplish has nothing to do with either of those. Then you has nothing to do with winding up or winding down. You're kind of neutral. So there's three different statuses: wind up, wind down, or just neutral. Then the status moving left to right is how peaceful you feel. So further left if you are currently in a peaceful place, versus to the right as you get more anxious, if you're feeling anxious in the moment and you're trying. My goal would be that this becomes, in addition to a daily meditation practice, this kind of can also become your hub for kind of dealing with high anxiety situations. I know I personally would benefit from that, especially if you're dealing with a lot of angst, a lot of existential shit. You'll be able to come to overview, pull up in the direction, or up or down in the direction of how you feel and what your effect is. So what the effect is that you want. So for example, depth is the color, if you're looking to wind down to go to sleep or to engage in a contemplative practice from peaceful place, that's the color there. Clarity is you're in a peaceful place and you want to, with positive energy, infuse positive energy, wind up for the day and get going, go for a run, go for a whatever, right? Then those are the different colors. And then insight is, you're in a peaceful place and just want to kind of experience overview. Whereas if you're in crisis, the upper right-hand corner here, that's deep red color, that is, I'm in a bad situation, I'm in an anxious moment, but I also have to keep going. I don't have time to stop and be contemplative. I got to deal with some shit. That's crisis. So you pick the color, you drag and pick the color, or click or tap at the color that makes sense, that feels like it's consistent with where you are. And we'll get better about this, what it means. Then you click go. Then you'll notice there's a little button in the upper right hand corner that has the color that you selected and this little root around symbol. And if you hover over it on your computer, you'll see it says start over. That's to go back to the beginning and do it again. So you, at any point in time, you're like, this isn't, maybe I picked the wrong color. I'm not getting the results that I wanted. I'm not getting the meditation that I need. You can just tap on that and it takes you back to the beginning. And so, yeah, I mean, I really am doing a lot of forward thinking about this. So as you pick a color that corresponds to the kind of overview that you need right now, it will filter live with these different sessions. Right now, all the sessions that are in there are hard coded into the front page or into this page. So none of these are real. You'll see that they say demo next to it. That means it's not actually pulling from the database yet, which is fine because there's nothing in the database anyway. Once you click on the session, you'll be able to hit play on the demo that you or on the session that you have selected. Obviously, it doesn't work yet. And then you can also adjust the voice track and the music track, depending upon what's comfortable for you. And then you can choose different session to go back, choose a different one. And of course, at any point in time, if you are like, let's just start over, you can just start over. So I am pretty passionate about this. I don't know that it's, I don't know if I'm the only one who's excited about this, but I am super excited about this. I think that overview is going to become one of the most important parts of the future of Korohorism. And so this is my plan. So I'm putting a vision for the future out there. Again, I don't get visions from God, and I don't know the future. No man can know of anything which is to come, and certainly not this man. But this is what my plan is, and so I can hold myself accountable. You guys can hold me accountable, and we can improve the offerings of the Church of Korohor. I am going to launch one new overview session per week, and I would like to ask for at least one volunteer in the community each week to contribute one also. I'm not asking anybody, any one person, to come up with 4 overviews a month. I'm asking that every week I'm going to ask a different person if they would be willing to help with creating an overview. If it is one that you read where you are the voice, great. If it is one where you are the one who's doing the writing, and then we either get AI to make one of the voice to read it, or I read it, and then an alternate version is produced using 11 Labs, which is software that we can use to convert my voice into myriad other voices. Because not everybody wants to listen to my voice. Some people are triggered by a man's voice and don't need to be hearing that, So I want to create a variety of different sessions that people can choose, so that they can enjoy overview, and that it's not just my brain coming up with it. It's also you guys talking about or crafting something that you need and that you think other people like you will need. And let's create multiple versions of overview. So I will commit to making at least one overview session a week going forward. My goal is to have dozens of overviews by the time we get to the anniversary of the Church of Korohor, which is December. It's coming right up. So that's one goal. Another goal is that I would like to add at least one Godless hymn to be contributed by a member of our community, and one new Godless sermon from a member of our community, and one from a special guest every single month. So every month, I like to have at least one Godless sermon that is somebody who's already a contributor or will be a contributor, part of our community at the Church of Korohor, and also one that will be a special guest who is somebody from outside of our community, so we can get more ideas and we can get more inspiration from the broader atheist agnostic community to help us to sharpen where we're going. Some ideas that I would like, for example, that I've been kind of throwing around. I would definitely like to see Britt Hartley give us a sermon. Also, I'm hoping to ask. I don't want to overcommit, but I think we could get. What am I thinking of? Why names? Why is it names always? I really got to switch over. I got to start supplementing with something too. Blah blah blah. Richard Carrier. Richard Carrier, if you guys don't know, was a big part of atheism 3.0, atheism, and atheism plus as a movement, just kind of fizzled out and died. But he's a really good speaker. He's a really nice guy. I know that he's not, perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. I would definitely like to ask him to come in and help us out. I have some other friends in the community that I'm planning to ask. But I was thinking some other people that we could bring on board might be people like Jimmy Snow. I definitely would like to ask Gutsick Gibbons, who I do not know, but who I think would be great. Then I, of course, plan to extend an invitation to some big names in the community to come and give us godless sermons, particularly people like Sam Harris. I'd love to reach out to more people in the community, both small-time creators, people who aren't technically creators, authors, and to make that happen, here's the problem. Okay, so I think it's a good idea. I think it will help us to expand the base of our appeal, and it would give us some good ideas and help inspire us to move this movement in a positive way. And Disa Thomas is another one I've been thinking about, who is the head of Black Unbelievers. I definitely want to see more voices from people of color. I definitely want to start getting some godless hymns from men. I don't want to actively promote that we're trying to find men, but I definitely also don't want our movement to become associated so fully with feminism that it's just all women and then one dude. It starts to feel weird. It starts to feel too Keith Raniere like, even it's like one dude and then all these women. I'm not saying, but of course, I just don't want to diminish the fact that women are really central to the future and have been central from the beginning to the future of where the Church of Korihor is going. And so there's going to be a lot more. I'm hoping there's going to be a lot more sermons by women than there are by men, but we do need some dudes. All of that, again, the technical side of organizing it is the most difficult thing, has been the most difficult thing to organizing these sermons, scheduling them, and so forth. So in September, I'm going to launch a system that will allow us to organize people who want to volunteer to give a sermon, what they want to give sermons about, and for somebody in our community as a luminary to step up and be the person who will schedule all of those. Right now, I rely a lot on a pair of luminaries to do most of our work, and they have full-time jobs and they have a lot going on, and it's a lot to ask of them. So I would like to see us find somebody who can volunteer. If they're not a luminary, that's fine. We could ask somebody to just volunteer to run the godless sermon scheduling. I also would love to see somebody volunteer to volunteer to organize godless sermons, and somebody also to organize appearances and guesting for the luminaries and heralds of the Church of Korihor, somebody who could be in charge of communicating to podcasters, YouTube creators who are looking for guests for their programs, and coordinate with them with the schedule, with my schedule, and hopefully potentially some of these other luminaries as they come up in our organization, so we can get more of our people out there appearing on other people's programs. We'll, maybe we'll organize some debates. We'll organize some people to appear to talk about our movement, and especially to get people to talk about their story and what's important about what we're doing in the Church of Korihor. It can't just be me out there, but I am certainly willing to be out there and available. But my role again is to support the luminaries, primarily more than anything, and to support all of the community of the Church of Korihor. So, but I really would love to see that somebody who wants to volunteer and wants to serve, but they don't, maybe your mode of service is less about cooking for people, collecting and distributing blankets for people, doing things, part of our ordinary missionary work. If it is communications, that is your specialty, but we sure could use the help. So in the next week, my plan, this week, because today's the 31st. So this first week of September, my plan is to launch and really implement a volunteer organizing system so that people can volunteer. So be on the lookout for that. I'll be sending out notifications by email, and of course I'll be talking about it during podcasts and so forth. But if we can get some people who can volunteer to pick up some of the heavy lifting, it sure would help me out a lot. Right now, I'm kind of pushed to the limit here on time and lack of sleep, and I need to focus a little bit on my mental health here, because it's not in your interest or mine for me to start slipping on my mental health, which has been fairly good, by the way, for the last couple of weeks, in spite of what I may appear. So let's see here. And so that is, and then the last thing is that it is my plan in September that we are going to begin to release shorts on YouTube and on TikTok for the Church of Korihor that are shareable, so that more people can share moments, especially from Godless sermons, and especially Godless sermons that aren't made by me, though, of course, I'm happy to have, people share any of the information from our Godless sermons so that they know what we're doing, and so that those people who need to know that Korihorism is not a joke will learn this is not a joke. This is serious. We're doing something really amazing, really important here. Because like I've said many times by now, to some people, the Church of Korihor is a joke. And we are fine with that. I am fine with that. Because the fact of the matter is, the more people who know who we are and what we are doing, so far my experience is, the more enemies we create almost right away. I don't harp on about this because I don't want to give anybody the impression that I have a persecution complex. Some of you who heard me rant for 5 hours on Friday, what the hell, know that I have actually had a few Mormons in particular who have attacked me when they found out that the Church of Korihor is an actual church. And at first, it was great fun. I won't kid you. The snarky, toxic atheist in me was like, oh, hell yeah, let's fight. But then over time, I came to realize if everybody took us as seriously as we take ourselves, and we try not to take ourselves too seriously, we try to have some sense of humor about ourselves, or at least I try to. Because you have to. If it gets too serious, it's not fun anymore. And the fun is a big part of why we do this. But but it's not a joke. We actually do good things. We actually serve people. We actually make a difference in the world. And so we kind of have to balance how many people are aware that we're a thing and that it's real, that it's not a joke, it's real, and balance out with how many people are part of our community who are taking it seriously enough that they're going to emerge as leaders in the community and help me to serve these people. All of that for me, between the two sides, as people outside of our community become more and more aware of who we are, we need to be bringing up more and more people who join up with what we're doing, who what we're doing appeals to them and makes them want to be a part of it and say, hell yeah, I want to try that. All of that is going to be centered around the personal experience with the offerings of the Church of Korihor. And that's going to definitely be hymns. And so far, hymns, I think, are probably our best. Godless sermons, however, are a pretty close second. So far, I get a lot of great feedback on our Godless sermons, and people really seem to enjoy them. And we're going to get better at them. And especially as we get more people to give Godless sermons, we're going to get much better at it. I sure hope to get Beth Magnetic back on here. I don't know if you guys remember Beth Magnetic's sermon about healing our relationship with money. I sure really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I got a lot out of it. And she is great. And I definitely want to get her more involved. If we can, keeping it light, keeping it happy and free and fun. But also there are these voices, the voices, especially of women, and voices of women of color, voices of people of color, Black and Indigenous people of color, are going to be a big part of the future. I'm hoping. Because if we don't, if it just becomes, I don't want to make it the stakes too high, but we'll say it this way. The success of the future of what we're building here is going to depend upon a diversity of voices, and especially a diversity of voices that includes people from the gay, lesbian, transgender, and queer community, people from the agnostic and spiritual, not religious side of the nuns, not just neckbeard atheists like me, and people who are not cisgender males. So we need more gay guys. We need more, we need non-binary people. We need, and trans people. And we need as many of these voices as we can get involved in what we're doing. We need to celebrate these people, and we need to serve these people. And the more of those voices we have as a part of this movement is the stronger it's going to be. And particularly because they are the most underserved in our community, in our population. And they are also in a moment right now where they feel, it seems to me, and without trying very hard, that the more I listen, the more cause I feel there is to worry. That the people in our world right now who are not conservative, cisgender, straight, white men are terrified, are really legitimately terrified for their safety and their well-being. If these people, if we don't show up for them individually as people and as an organization, it could be a matter of harm in the world if we don't step up to do something. Some of what I hope to see happen in the future of Korohorism is going to be things we're only going to talk about amongst ourselves in the room. And that's why part of my plan is going to be in October and November this year to start organizing in-person events across the country. Some things about what we do are going to require sanctuary. Some of you were on Friday, some of you weren't, when I ranted for 5 hours. And in part of that, which by the way, we're not headed to that right now. We're wrapping up right now. And it's only been 2 hours, only 2 hours of sermonizing. We'll know that I announced and read a few passages from our new standard of conduct for clergy of the Church of Korihor, in which I announced that Korihors are mandatory reporters going forward, in that as long as it doesn't bring harm to the person who is a victim of abuse, if you are clergy in the Church of Korihor, unlike clergy in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Catholic Church, and other organizations like that, if you are aware of plausible reason to believe that there is abuse happening in your pastoral care, amongst people in your pastoral care, it is going to become your responsibility to report it within 24 hours. No exceptions. Now, of course, that always is going to be, and there's a list included in these standards of conduct of what you have to do first. And the first step to ensure the safety of the person who is a victim in this situation. So all of that is laid out in our standards. But we are the first church I know of where every person who is going to serve in our clergy is criminal background tested. Who's that? Is that my JoJo? Is it my Elijah? It's got to be a JoJo. Why are they so quiet? Hey, wordless boy. Better check and make sure he's eating. Molly's up there, so it's not like I've abandoned anybody. I'll be right there, buddy. Just gonna play with that until I come up there. Anyways. Oh, good point, Lisa. Megan, we definitely got to get overviews with Megan and music. Megan Connor, those of you who don't know, is one of the people who's expressed interest in helping us with Godless hymns. She's great. If you don't know Megan from Third Verse / what else is her podcast has 2 names. I forget. Anyways, Midlife Revolution. Yeah. Anyway, if you don't know her, she's amazing. But she's an opera singer, and she's been interested for a while in contributing music to the Church of Korihor. Super exciting. I'm excited about the future. The more offerings we give, where people can sing with us, meditate with us, and serve with us. Midlife Revolution. Thank you, MB. And serve with us. And the more opportunities we create for people to step up and be a part of this movement and serve others, is the more I think that we're going to see that our goal, our creed in transforming painful lives into lives worth living really does start each person with transforming their own life. I know it's worked for me. I am grateful for every opportunity you have given me to serve and to be of service to you. It's time for us to grow this community and to serve people from outside of our community. And therein we will create opportunities for us to serve and for others to serve. And it will take money. That will be a big part of it. We'll figure out and improve the money side of things as we go. And anybody who has any ideas for that, I'm certainly open to them. But Right now, I think the most important part of our movement is people and time. And I am grateful to each of you for giving me some of yours. I hope that my voice has been a constructive part of your life. Sounds a lot like I'm about to die with that phrase. Let me rephrase that. I hope that what I am doing is creating positivity in your lives and that you are getting a lot out of it. I plan to get better, and I will plan also to incorporate more people who have a lot more experience and have a lot broader perspective to add to this movement than what I currently have. And I think we will all definitely benefit from it as we go forward. And when I wake up every day, I don't mind telling you guys the idea that that will happen, the dream that is what the Church of Korihor will become, makes me more excited than anything I have done professionally in my entire life. I feel like my entire life has been building up to this. I have tried to do other things. I've tried to organize things. I've tried to start things in so many myriad of ways, and I made so many mistakes over the course of my life and learned from them largely. That right now I feel like we are all beneficiaries of my failures over these years, because I have learned that I have learned from those failures, first of all, that I can't do it by myself, and that if I'm not careful, I will try to. And we can't let that happen with the Church of Korihor. It's got to become a community movement where I create opportunities for other people, and those people stand up and be a part of it and become the main part of it. And people hear less and less from me. And even though I plan to increase my output, I want there to be so much output from the Church of Korihor that my voice is only one of a large community of people. There's a call here for leaders. There are people who are already leaders in your own field, leaders in your own right. And then there are people out there who know in your heart that leadership is part of your, for lack of a better term, calling in life. And I want to make the opportunities for you to do that. And that's what this is going to be about. Korohorism is about you. And I am part of it. I'm proud to be a part of it. And it will get better. Amen. Let's sermonize with one of our favorite new hymns, or hymnalize with one of our favorite new hymns. And I look forward to making some new announcements here on Wednesday. I hope to announce that Overview is working. And I hope to be able to announce the near future of organizing volunteers. So, wish me luck. Don't forget, between here and there, don't forget, it's a quiet fight.
Never forget, it's a quiet fight. In their shadow, guard the light. We are still here. Reason prevails. Arm in arm.